Anna Miller had always believed in raising her son with a sense of freedom to explore, to question, and, most importantly, to feel at home in his own body. That's why, after years of scraping together savings, she moved them both out of the cramped city apartment and into a quiet suburban neighborhood where birdsong replaced sirens, and the backyard stretched out like an open canvas of possibility. Her son, Jamie, was 6, bright-eyed, sensitive, and curious about everything. He loved nature in the most innocent way a child can, barefoot and laughing, chasing butterflies, studying beetles, digging small trenches for imaginary rivers with a stick. For Anna, watching him run across their grass-covered backyard without shoes reminded her of her own childhood, something she hadn't thought about in years. It felt like she was finally doing something right, finally giving him something she had once cherished, unstructured, unfiltered joy. The house they'd moved into wasn't grand, but it had heart. A modest 2-bedroom with creaky floors and a wide bay window in the living room that let in golden afternoon light. There was a small garden plot where Anna planted herbs and vegetables, and she often worked from the shaded patio on her laptop while Jamie played. She taught environmental science part-time at a community college and spent the rest of her days balancing parenting, grading, and making sure Jamie had a stable, happy environment to grow in. Stability had not come easy to either of them. Anna had left an emotionally volatile relationship 2 years earlier, and since then, her priority had been to build peace from the ground up. So, when they first arrived in the neighborhood, she had genuinely hoped this would be a new beginning for both of them. But it didn't take long before she noticed the eyes. Watching from behind white curtains, peeking through blinds. It started with polite, clipped conversations at the mailbox, the kind where neighbors ask questions that are really thinly veiled judgments. Do you not worry about splinters when he's running around without shoes? Or, is it sanitary to let him dig? In the garden like that? Anna smiled through it, assuming people simply needed time to adjust to newcomers, especially ones who didn't fit the typical mold. But it wasn't just idle curiosity. It was surveillance disguised as concern. One woman in particular, a rigidly composed older resident named Karen, stood out. Her yard was pristine, geometrically trimmed hedges and flower beds arranged with mathematical precision. She didn't wave. She stared. On a warm Tuesday morning, Jamie ran into the yard in his favorite blue t-shirt, giggling as he leapt onto the grass. Anna, still sipping her coffee, watched him from the porch, basking in the rare feeling of contentment. That's when she noticed Karen standing still at the edge of her own property, phone raised just high enough to be recording or photographing. She didn't speak, didn't wave, just captured the moment and turned away. At first, Anna didn't take it seriously. Maybe Karen was taking a picture of her own flower beds, or maybe it was just an awkward coincidence. But her stomach tightened in a way she didn't expect. Something about Karen's stance, her silence, her deliberate movements, it didn't feel random. That evening, Anna found a folded paper shoved into her mailbox. It wasn't from the postal service. It had no stamp or return address. It was a printed notice, anonymous but specific. A complaint about unsupervised minor seen barefoot on unprotected lawn area and potential neglectful environment for child welfare consideration. It ended with a single sentence. Please take appropriate steps before external authorities are contacted. No name, no contact. Just a threat wrapped in faux official wording. Anna reread it 3 times, her pulse gradually quickening, heart sinking as she processed what it meant. She looked over at Jamie, sitting cross-legged on the floor drawing pictures of caterpillars, completely unaware of the storm someone was trying to stir. For a long moment, Anna just stood there in the hallway, holding the letter in both hands. Her first instinct was denial. Surely no one would go that far over a child playing barefoot. It was absurd. Then she realized the deeper truth. It wasn't about barefoot children or gardening or grass. It was about control, about policing the lives of people who didn't fit someone else's rigid definition of normal. Someone had made up their mind about her, and now they were moving in shadows, building a case against her. And whether it made sense or not didn't matter. Once someone knocks on your door with a clipboard and a badge, the burden of proving you're a good parent suddenly shifts to you. 2 days after Anna found the anonymous complaint in her mailbox, a white SUV with government plates pulled up to the curb outside her house. It was a bright Thursday afternoon, and Jamie was in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt and quietly poking at the edge of a worm he had unearthed. Anna was rinsing vegetables in the kitchen sink when she noticed the car idling just past her driveway, and she immediately felt her chest tighten, as if her body recognized danger before her mind caught up. The engine cut off and a woman stepped out. Mid-40s, button-down shirt tucked into gray slacks, a leather folder in hand, and a badge clipped to her belt. She approached the front door with a kind of rehearsed calm that made Anna feel instantly defensive. When the knock came, sharp but polite, Anna had to take a breath before answering. "Ms. Miller?" the woman asked, tilting her head slightly as she made eye contact. "I'm Marla Evans. I'm with Child Protective Services. We received a report regarding possible neglect and would like to speak with you and see the premises, if you don't mind." Her tone was even, professional, almost bored, as though she were reading from a script she had used dozens of times. Anna stood frozen for a second before replying, managing to summon a controlled, "Of course. May I ask what specifically the report stated?" Marla nodded and flipped open her folder. It mentioned a child playing in unsafe outdoor conditions, lack of footwear, presence of unsanitary objects in play areas, and— she paused here as if choosing her words carefully— inattentive supervision by the parent. She looked up again. "This doesn't mean we're assuming anything. We just have to follow protocol when a report is made." Anna didn't say anything right away. She felt her ears start to ring, not out of guilt but out of a wave of helpless rage that built inside her like steam in a kettle. Jamie was outside, still crouched in the grass, humming to himself while he observed the worm, completely oblivious to the fact that someone was inside his home trying to determine whether his mother was fit to raise him. "You're welcome to see the backyard," Anna said eventually, her voice low and tight. "I'll show you around." She led Marla through the sliding glass door onto the patio, gesturing toward the neatly kept grass, the vegetable bed, the shaded corner with a sandbox and water table, all of it maintained with care and intention. There were no tools left lying around, no sharp objects, no signs of disorder or neglect. Everything had its place, and if anything, the area looked more curated than lived in. Marla walked slowly, making notes, asking occasional questions. "How often does he play out here? Is he always barefoot? Do you sanitize the sandbox? Are there ever animals that come onto the property?" Anna answered each one evenly, with the cool clarity of a mother who knows she has done nothing wrong, but also understands that innocence doesn't always shield you from suspicion. At one point, Marla knelt beside Jamie and introduced herself, asking him what he liked most about his yard. Jamie, ever sociable, told her about the worms, the beetles, and the carrot they were growing that he had named Captain Root. Marla smiled, wrote something down, and stood back up. The visit lasted 23 minutes. When it ended, Marla told Anna that the property was clean and there were no visible signs of neglect, but she would still have to file a formal assessment. "You'll receive documentation in the mail," she said. "It doesn't mean anything negative. It's just the process." She handed Anna a card. "If you have any questions, feel free to call me directly." Then she got into her SUV and drove off, leaving behind a strange, hollow quiet. Anna locked the front door and stood in the hallway for a full minute, gripping the card in her hand as her brain tried to reconcile the surreal experience she'd just had. She wasn't afraid of being found guilty of something she hadn't done. She was afraid of how easily anyone could weaponize the system to make her look guilty in the first place. Later that night, when Jamie was asleep and the house was still, Anna sat on her laptop and began researching. She didn't type emotional search terms like false CPS reports or how to fight neighbors. She searched like a scientist, analytical, precise. She looked up procedural outlines for CPS visits, legal rights during investigations, timelines for report closures, and community ordinances related to parental supervision. She discovered that anonymous reports were protected under state law, and while that made sense in principle, in practice it meant that anyone with a personal grudge or twisted sense of righteousness could launch a deeply invasive process against another person with zero accountability. Worse, repeated reports, even unsubstantiated ones, could lead to long-term monitoring. The system didn't always distinguish between malicious interference and genuine concern. It just recorded the frequency. The next morning, Anna contacted a local attorney who specialized in family rights. She didn't want to escalate the situation legally, but she needed guidance, someone to explain what her rights were, what her options were, and how to prepare for the possibility that this wasn't over. The lawyer, a woman named Elise Green, was calm and measured. "You're doing the right thing by documenting everything," she told Anna over the phone. "Keep a journal. Save every letter. Take photos of your yard regularly. Track who comes near your home. If this is a one-off, great. If it isn't, we'll be ready." Anna felt a strange sense of relief hearing those words. Someone believed her without needing her to prove anything first. But it didn't end there. The following week, Anna received another letter. This time, it wasn't anonymous. It came in a branded envelope from the neighborhood committee and was signed by 3 board members, including Karen. It cited a pattern of behavior inconsistent with community standards and referred vaguely to concerns raised by residents. The letter didn't mention Jamie by name, nor did it include specific accusations, but it dripped with coded language: noncompliance, visual disorder, child safety risks. At the bottom was a list of recommendations: installation of safety signage, use of appropriate footwear for children, and refraining from allowing prolonged unsupervised play. Anna stared at the paper, stunned by the audacity. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about Jamie. It was about obedience, about control, about pushing her into a mold she had no intention of fitting into. She wanted to confront Karen, to show her how twisted and wrong this all was, but Elise advised against it. People like that feed off reaction. They want you to lose your temper so they can point to it and say you're unstable. Don't give them that. So Anna didn't confront her, not directly. Instead, she bought a small external hard drive and began backing up every email, photo, and message related to her son, her yard, her home. She installed a motion-activated light at the side gate and trimmed back the hedges so no one could stand behind them unseen. She started writing everything down: times, dates, phrases used in conversations. Not because she was afraid she was going to lose custody of her child, because she had finally realized that the threat wasn't some vague misunderstanding. It was a deliberate strategy, designed to exhaust her until she either gave up or broke down. And through it all, Jamie kept playing. He didn't know that the dirt beneath his feet had become a battleground. He just knew it felt good, that it was soft and cool and free. The first sign that things were about to escalate came not with noise, but with silence. The kind of silence that hangs in the air when something is brewing just beneath the surface. It began with the small things. Neighbors Anna had smiled at for weeks began averting their eyes, nodding quickly but avoiding conversation. The friendly man who used to wave from across the street as he watered his azaleas now closed his gate the moment she stepped outside. A woman with a stroller, whom Anna had once helped when the wheels got stuck on uneven sidewalk stones, crossed the street instead of passing in front of her house. At first, Anna thought she was imagining it, a paranoid reaction to the stress she'd been under. But the pattern repeated, and it became harder to deny that something was shifting. that her presence in the neighborhood was being recast, not as single mother with a curious child, but as someone quietly marked. Then came the email. It arrived late at night from a general neighborhood mailing list Anna had signed up for when she first moved in. The subject line read, "Community Standards and Resident Responsibility." The message was passive-aggressive in its tone, clearly not naming her but unmistakably targeting her. It referenced ongoing concerns about yard visibility and non-compliant family behaviors, then rambled about the importance of modeling appropriate conduct for the sake of children's development and maintaining community peace. There was no signature, only the initials of the residents' council. But the damage was done. The message acted like a quiet bell toll, a coded signal to the rest of the community. Anna didn't reply. She knew it would serve no purpose. 2 days later, Karen stood outside Anna's front gate at 9:12 a.m., clipboard in hand and a carefully curated smile on her face. "Good morning, Ms. Miller," she said as Anna opened the door, already on edge. "We've had a few updates to community policies I wanted to deliver personally." She extended a packet, pages stapled in aggressive thickness, each one filled with fine print and bolded terms. Anna didn't reach for it. "You can leave it in the box," she said, trying to remain polite. Karen didn't flinch. "Some of it concerns your property directly," she added with a slight emphasis that felt like a veiled threat. "Specifically around unregulated child activity and lawn modification." Anna's fingers clenched slightly. "You mean my son playing in our yard?" Karen's smile didn't fade. "We've had multiple observations of unsupervised outdoor activity and non-standard landscaping features. The bylaws require visual conformity, especially for front-facing yards. It's all in the documents." Anna stepped outside and met Karen's eyes directly. "Are you saying my son playing barefoot in our yard is now a violation?" Karen tilted her head, feigning confusion. "I'm not saying anything. I'm simply informing you of the collective concerns that have been raised." And with that, she placed the packet in the mailbox and walked away. Anna stood there watching her retreat, rage mixing with something colder and sharper. Resolve. She called Elise that afternoon and faxed over the new documents. Elise skimmed through them and called back half an hour later. "They're trying to build pressure, but none of this is enforceable," she said. "They're counting on the fact that you'll either leave voluntarily or make a mistake they can use against you." Anna leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "How do you fight something that's not official but still dangerous?" Elise was quiet for a moment. "You prepare. You don't escalate, and you don't give them anything they can twist." But preparing wasn't always enough. That same evening, when Anna took Jamie to a local park to get a break from the house, she returned to find a yellow citation taped to her door. It wasn't from the police. It was from the Residential Oversight Committee, a newly created subgroup listed on the document with Karen's name at the bottom. It stated that Anna was being issued a formal warning for failure to conform to visual expectations and unauthorized environmental modification, referencing the stone pathway she'd laid between her back door and the garden, which had been there for months. The document included a photo. Someone had taken it from behind the fence, likely at night, given the dim flash. That was the first time Anna realized someone had physically entered her property. She hadn't heard anything. No cameras had caught it, but the evidence was in her hands. The next day, she went to the hardware store and bought motion-triggered perimeter alarms, not the kind that record, but the kind that scream. She installed them quietly at night, not wanting Jamie to know something was wrong. That week, Karen walked by 3 times, each time pausing for just a second too long near Anna's front steps, as if daring her to speak. Anna didn't. She simply stood in the doorway and stared back, not blinking. Then came the knock that truly pushed things over the line. It was a Friday evening, just before dusk, when a man in a maintenance uniform appeared at her gate. He introduced himself as a landscaping contractor, assigned to assess safety upgrades to her yard. When Anna asked who had hired him, he shrugged and said his office had received a request from the community board. "I'm here to measure and photograph," he said. "Shouldn't take more than 15 minutes." Anna refused him entry and demanded a written work order. The man, clearly caught off guard, hesitated, mumbled something about confusion and just doing his job, then left. But the next morning, the real escalation arrived, not in the form of a person, but a letter. It was a thick envelope, couriered directly to her door, with an official-looking seal printed on the front. Inside was a cease and desist letter, not from the city or any legal entity, but from the neighborhood's private counsel, accusing Anna of obstructing compliance assessments and refusing to cooperate with community directives. It stated that if further non-participation continued, she could be subject to property reassessment procedures, a phrase so vaguely bureaucratic that it sounded like something pulled from a dystopian manual. Elise reviewed the document and called it what it was: a psychological squeeze play. "They want you to feel surrounded," she said. "That's the whole game." What they didn't count on, however, was that Anna had grown up with worse. Her own childhood had been filled with voices louder than Karen's, systems more broken than a petty residential board, and far more terrifying consequences than angry letters and camera flashes. She'd survived a household where silence had been a weapon, where smiling through fear was a necessary skill. These people didn't scare her. They exhausted her. They infuriated her. But they didn't scare her. So she adapted. She scheduled a landscaping review of her own, one conducted by a city-certified inspector who issued a written statement that her yard met all environmental safety standards. She made sure the report was dated, notarized, and copied. She filed a formal inquiry with the city zoning board regarding the so-called Oversight Committee, asking whether it held any legal standing. She began locking her gate, documenting every interaction, recording her own notes after every incident. And above all, she kept smiling for her son, who still ran barefoot through the grass, blissfully unaware that every blade beneath his feet had now become part of a larger war, one that his mother had no intention of losing. There was a specific type of dread that settled in the body when reality twisted just enough to feel foreign, and for Anna, that feeling came the moment she noticed the pattern etched into the bottom corner of the new notice posted on her fence. It wasn't just another standard complaint, it was a carbon copy form stamped with an insignia she hadn't seen before: Community Partnership for Civic Harmony. At first glance, it looked like another made-up subdivision of the local council. But something about the language stood out. The wording wasn't aggressive or bureaucratic. It was soft, coaxing, strangely persuasive. It referred to neighborhood recalibration initiatives, opportunities for behavioral alignment, and civic image development for families with young dependents. There was nothing concrete in it. No dates, no demands, just implication. But that was the point. It wasn't what the notice said. It was what it insinuated, that she was being watched, that the pressure was institutional now, that whatever had started with Karen was growing into something bigger, something coordinated. Anna scanned the signature at the bottom. No name, just initials. CPC Harmony Coordinator, District East. She Googled the program but found nothing official. No website, no press releases, no records. It didn't exist in the way real things existed, but that didn't mean it wasn't real. That afternoon, she took the notice to Elise, who studied it without blinking. "This is manufactured," she said finally. "Not by an agency, but by someone who wants it to look like one. This is how intimidation evolves. They're trying to make it seem like you're now under the eye of something beyond them." Anna asked if it was legal. Elise shook her head. Not if it's being distributed as official without real backing. But proving that takes time, and time is what they're trying to steal from you. Anna didn't say anything. She just nodded and folded the paper, sliding it back into her bag. She didn't need proof of their intentions. She could feel it. 2 nights later, Anna heard the sound. Not loud, not startling, just the low scrape of something metallic against pavement. It was past midnight. Jamie was asleep, and Anna had been reading by the living room window, the curtains half drawn. She turned off the light and moved toward the front of the house, peering through the dark glass. At first, she saw nothing. Then, under the glow of the street lamp, she caught movement. 2 figures in dark hooded sweatshirts moving along the fence line. One carried what looked like a measuring tape. The other held a clipboard. They weren't in a hurry. They weren't hiding. They were methodical. Like they belonged. Like they'd done this before. Anna's heart pounded, but she didn't move. She didn't call out. She didn't flick on the porch light. She just watched as the 2 figures walked along her property line, stopped near the stone pathway, made a note, and left. When morning came, she found a red chalk mark on the sidewalk outside her gate and a thin white flag staked beside her mailbox. No message attached. She documented both, then removed them carefully and placed them in a plastic folder with the others. The escalation wasn't just psychological anymore. It was procedural. A simulated process of inspection and judgment meant to make her feel as if she had no control, as if her home wasn't hers, as if the ground beneath her son's feet could be measured, audited, deemed unfit. Elise advised her to contact the city inspector's office to verify any recent surveys, but the office had no records of any. "This is private," the clerk said. No permits filed, no official access. That confirmed it. They weren't acting within law, but they were acting within perception. And in a suburban world ruled by HOA whispers and social engineering, perception could sometimes eclipse legality. Anna began sleeping with a notepad by her bed. She documented everything: times, sounds, phrases overheard in passing, shifts in neighbor behavior. Her house became a quiet operations center, not of panic, but of preparation. She reviewed her security system, added motion lights to the backyard, and began keeping her phone fully charged beside her pillow. And yet, despite the tension, there was something solidifying in her. The fear was still there. Yes, but it had calcified into vigilance. She didn't shake anymore when she passed Karen on the sidewalk. She didn't flinch when new community circulars appeared in her mailbox. She had moved beyond shock. Now she was simply waiting for them to make the mistake she could act on. And they did. It came in the form of a message left on her voicemail one Thursday afternoon. The voice was familiar, though not one she knew personally, an older man's, measured and direct. "Ms. Miller," the message began, "we understand your resistance to the adjustments being introduced in the area, but we urge you to consider the long-term benefits of cooperation. Non-alignment often leads to consequences that are not ideal for dependent minors. Please reach out within the next week if you would like to discuss integration options." There was no name, no return number, just a mechanical click at the end. Anna played it 3 times. Jamie was napping in the other room, and the house felt heavier with every repetition. The use of the word dependent, the phrase integration options, the calm assertion of inevitable consequences. It wasn't a threat, it was a negotiation without terms. She forwarded the recording to Elise, who had it analyzed. The number was a masked VoIP redirect, untraceable. But the voice analysis confirmed what Anna suspected. It matched another resident, a man she'd seen occasionally speaking to Karen near the tennis courts, one who always wore reflective sunglasses and never smiled. "He's not on any official board," Elise said, "but that doesn't mean he isn't pulling strings." For the first time, Anna considered leaving. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. She thought about listing the house, finding a smaller place in a neighborhood where children weren't treated like liabilities. But the idea of explaining that to Jamie, of uprooting him because some adults were too broken to tolerate joy, made her feel physically ill. That night, she sat with him on the floor, building a Lego spaceship, and when he asked if they were ever going to move again, she said no with a certainty that surprised even her. "This is our home," she told him. "No one else gets to decide that." The next morning, a flyer appeared on every doorstep in the neighborhood. It was formatted like a newsletter, cheerful fonts, stock images of smiling families, but the content was unmistakable. An article in the second column described modern parenting challenges, referencing families that introduce unconventional behaviors, failure to conform to safety norms, and cases where neighborhood intervention became necessary for the well-being of all residents. Again, there were no names, but again, the message was clear. Anna was the headline, just without the courtesy of using her name. But something else happened that day. A neighbor she barely knew, an older woman named Denise who lived 2 houses down, knocked on Anna's door around lunchtime. She didn't say much, just held up the flyer, shook her head, and said, "You're not the only one who thinks this is insane." Then she handed Anna a file folder and walked away. Inside were copies of similar flyers going back 2 years. Slightly different language, different targets. A single mother with twins who had moved out after less than 8 months. A retired couple accused of improper yard maintenance, whose house was sold to a real estate developer. A family with a teenage son on the spectrum who had been cited for disruptive behavior after he rode his bike past a meeting in session. Different names, same tactics. That was the moment everything shifted, because now Anna knew the system wasn't built for order. It was built for removal. It wasn't about barefoot children or pathway stones. It was about control, about pushing out anyone who didn't match the brochure image. And now she had patterns. She had history. She had proof. For the first time since this began, Anna didn't feel like prey. She felt like a case building itself into clarity, and she was going to make damn sure someone was going to answer for it. It happened on a Monday morning, fittingly mundane in every other way, with gray skies, the low hum of lawn mowers somewhere in the distance, and the smell of damp soil clinging to the wind, when Anna found the letter nailed, not taped, but nailed to her back gate. It wasn't just another notice. This one used language that was no longer veiled in implication but dripped with the entitlement of those who no longer feared exposure. Voluntary relocation is encouraged in cases of prolonged noncompliance and cultural dissonance, it read, a phrase so blatantly absurd and dystopian that Anna had to read it twice. Below that was a map of the neighborhood with her property outlined in red, and a legend in the corner labeling it as pending reassessment zone. There were no names on this document either, just a digital-style signature labeled Resident Compliance Committee, a body that didn't legally exist, but whose voice had become louder than any official institution in the area. She stood there for a long moment, the nail still lodged in the wood, the weight of it symbolic more than functional. It was a message, and not a subtle one. They were past pretending now. That same day, she noticed a series of newly installed stakes in the ground, thin metal rods with orange flags, surrounding the outer boundary of her lawn and even into the soil bed where Jamie had planted his carrots. They weren't placed by the city. There had been no prior notice, no permit signs. When Anna asked a neighbor if they had seen anyone placing them, they looked away and muttered that some maintenance guys were walking around real early, and then quickly excused themselves. She spent the afternoon pulling out each one with her bare hands, her fingers dirt-stained and raw by the time she was done. She placed them neatly on her front porch in a pile like evidence. That evening, someone threw a dead bird into her garden. Its neck was broken, its wings partially splayed. No note, no explanation. She buried it quietly while Jamie was inside watching cartoons, and for the first time, Her hands trembled. The campaign wasn't just procedural now. It had become visceral. There was no mistaking the intent. The goal was no longer to frighten her into conformity. It was to grind her down, inch by inch, until she either fled or fractured. The next morning, she received a notification from the local property assessment office. A community-initiated petition had been submitted requesting a reassessment of her home's compliance status, citing concerns about environmental suitability and child safety infrastructure. When Anna called to inquire, the clerk explained that, while such petitions were rare, they were technically permitted under the neighborhood's administrative charter, a document heavily influenced by the local council. "It doesn't mean anything will happen," the clerk said awkwardly, "but it triggers a review process." Anna thanked them and hung up. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat in silence for 5 full minutes, letting the numbness settle before pulling up her laptop and beginning to draft a formal objection. She included timestamps. She included photographs. She included a copy of the city's own safety inspection certifying her property as fully compliant just 3 weeks prior. She sent it all, not just to the office, but to Elise, the county commissioner, and a family advocacy watchdog organization she had found during one of her sleepless nights. 3 days later, she noticed that her mailbox had been forced open. The hinges bent, the interior empty. That same afternoon, a city code enforcement officer appeared at her door. This time, it was a man in his early 50s with a neutral expression and a clipboard, saying he'd received a request to verify that unauthorized structural modifications hadn't been made on her property. Anna invited him in without hesitation. She walked him through the yard, the kitchen, the hallway, pointing to every feature. "Everything here has been documented," she said clearly, handing him a folder of dated photographs and permits. The man blinked, visibly surprised. "This is more than we usually get." Anna stared at him and replied, "Because I'm not the one playing games." The man nodded and left without writing a citation. That night, a noise outside woke her at 2:43 a.m. A strange scraping sound followed by the clink of metal against glass. She turned on the backyard light to find that someone had thrown gravel across the patio and left behind an empty bucket with the words, "We warned you," spray-painted on its side. She called the non-emergency police line and filed an official incident report, and for the first time, she added the word harassment in her complaint. The officer who arrived was young and polite, but hesitant. He glanced around the yard, took a few photos, and asked if she had any idea who might be doing this. Anna stared at him, emotionless, and said, "I have a list." She handed over the copy of every letter, every citation, every notice. When he left, he said, "I'll make sure this gets filed." And though she knew it meant little in practical terms, it meant something symbolically. Her silence was no longer being interpreted as weakness. She was no longer invisible in this war. She had stepped forward. Meanwhile, Karen continued her routine strolls past the house, always at the same time, always with the same expression of carefully measured innocence. She never stopped, never spoke, but Anna had begun to notice her looking up, sometimes toward the windows, as if waiting for a response. One afternoon, when Jamie was drawing chalk rockets on the walkway, Karen passed by and said, "It's a shame when children aren't taught limits. They grow up confused." Anna turned to her and said flatly, "And people who overstep boundaries usually end up on the wrong side of lawsuits." Karen smiled, but it was tight, strained. That was the moment Anna saw it. The edge. Even people who believe they hold all the power have one. Karen was near hers. The final blow in that week's barrage came when Jamie came home from school unusually quiet. When Anna asked what happened, he mumbled something about a teacher pulling him aside to ask whether he ever played alone for a long time, or if he had a safe place to sleep. Anna's heart stopped. She emailed the school immediately and demanded an explanation. The principal called her the next morning and admitted, somewhat embarrassed, that an anonymous concerned citizen had submitted a wellness complaint to the school board. "It's protocol for us to do a wellness check when that happens," he said. "We're not suggesting anything is wrong. Jamie's one of the happiest, most well-adjusted kids here." Anna wanted to scream, but she thanked him, hung up, and sat with her head in her hands. The attacks were no longer limited to her. They were reaching for her son. That was the line. That evening she met with Elise and laid everything out. "They want me gone," she said. "They want to prove that they can break someone who doesn't fit their mold." Elise leaned forward. "Then let's make it clear what happens when they pick the wrong person." Anna didn't go to war with rage. She went to war with preparation. The turning point wasn't loud or cinematic. It was methodical, quiet, and exacting. She compiled a digital dossier that spanned over 100 pages, scanned documents, time-stamped photographs, annotated recordings, affidavits from neutral inspectors, and incident reports filed with the city and the local precinct. Every flag staked in her soil, every false citation, every passive-aggressive letter carefully photographed and labeled, connected to a date and a name. She didn't try to find out who Karen's friends were or speculate about secret meetings. She didn't waste time imagining conspiracy boards. She simply traced patterns, what was claimed, what was done, what was illegal, and what was manipulative. And when she was ready, she submitted it not to one office, but to 4. The county's Civil Harassment Unit, the city's Oversight Committee on Housing Abuse, the Legal Aid Society's Residential Advocacy Wing, and, most importantly, to a contact Elise had at a local investigative journalism nonprofit known for exposing systemic bullying disguised as suburban governance. Within 3 days, a reporter reached out. Anna didn't give an interview. She gave evidence. The reporter didn't need Anna's personal story to sensationalize anything. What Anna had assembled was cold, procedural, and damning. The story that followed wasn't about a barefoot child or even about Anna as an individual. It was about how an informal but powerful neighborhood committee had used performative bureaucracy and social coercion to systematically remove families that didn't conform to their community culture. The piece went live on a Tuesday afternoon, under the headline, "The Hidden Pressure System Behind Suburban Compliance." It didn't name Anna, but it named the neighborhood, and it named Karen. Within hours, comments flooded the page. The story trended locally. Another mother from a nearby development submitted her own experience in the comments section. Then another. Then someone from 2 blocks over. That same day, a formal complaint was opened with the city zoning office regarding unauthorized enforcement actions taken by residents not employed by or officially affiliated with any municipal body. The next morning, a police car parked briefly outside Anna's house, not in response to a call but as part of a city-ordered community welfare visit. For the first time in weeks, Anna stepped outside without tightening her shoulders. She didn't wave at the officer. She didn't need to. The quiet acknowledgement that she had been heard was enough. By the end of the week, the county issued a temporary cease and desist order against the so-called Resident Compliance Committee, freezing all pending actions, including the reassessment of Anna's home. Karen didn't show her face for 4 days. When she finally did reappear, walking her usual route with a carefully forced smile, it was clear the dynamic had shifted. No longer composed, she looked brittle, exposed, and though she walked the same line past Anna's house, she didn't stop or speak. She didn't even look toward the windows. The next neighborhood newsletter came out the following Monday. It was thin. No coded language. No articles about civic harmony or unstructured families. Just a reminder about trash collection times and an invitation to a spring cleanup event. Anna posted a physical copy of the article on her front gate, circled the headline in red, and left it there. That night, For the first time in over a month, Anna sat on the back porch with Jamie and watched him chase moths in the garden, barefoot and laughing under the porch light. She didn't flinch when a car drove by slowly. She didn't turn off the music playing softly from her phone. She didn't scan the fence for hidden eyes. The ground under her son's feet no longer felt like contested territory. It was just grass again. It was just home. And whatever came next, she had already proven that peace wasn't something anyone could give her, or take away. It was something she claimed with both hands, and she wasn't giving it back. In the weeks that followed, the silence around Anna's home took on a different tone. Not the tense waiting kind that preceded intrusion, but the natural quiet that comes when people finally mind their own business. No more flyers, no more fabricated notices, no more visits from clipboard-bearing strangers with manufactured authority. Karen had gone almost entirely unseen, and the committee that once acted as an invisible hand had, at least for now, dissolved into caution and public denial. The city had launched a formal review of private neighborhood oversight practices, and although Anna wasn't directly involved, her documentation had become part of the internal record, an example cited by local policymakers exploring legislation against informal community enforcement bodies acting without legal standing. She didn't seek revenge or public vindication. She didn't need to. What mattered was that her home, her child, her peace. Those things had been reclaimed not through shouting matches or counter-aggression, but through strategy, restraint, and evidence. Jamie returned to his playful routines as if nothing had happened, his world thankfully untouched by the darker intentions that had hovered just outside their windows. And Anna, though changed, was not broken. She had learned how quickly control could slip into cruelty when masked as concern, how people like Karen weaponized civility to inflict slow violence, and how important it was to hold your ground without surrendering to rage. Her garden flourished that spring, and so did something inside her, a quiet, steady strength that no longer asked permission to exist. And though she never again spoke to Karen or the others, she no longer felt surrounded. Her roots were deep now, and she knew, if ever tested again, she wouldn't need to run or justify her place. She already belonged.